At 3 a.m., on the 16th of April 1945, the banks of the Oder River, 40 miles east of Berlin, are trembling. This is not an earthquake. It is the idle rumble of 41,600 artillery pieces and mortars. Behind them, 6,250 tanks are warming their engines, filling the cold spring air with the thick, oily smell of diesel. And behind the tanks stand 2.5 million Soviet soldiers. They have walked from Stalingrad, from Kursk, from the gates of Moscow. They are tired, they are dirty, and they are fueled by a cold, hard rage that has been building for 4 years. They are about to deliver the final death blow to the Third Reich. Marshal Georgy Zhukov checks his watch. He is not just fighting the Germans. He is racing his rival, Marshal Koniev, to see who can claim the prize of Berlin for Stalin. At 3:01 a.m., Zhukov gives the signal. The sky vanishes. The horizon turns into a solid wall of fire. The artillery barrage is so dense, so violent, that it creates a localized weather system of shockwaves. On the German side, the defenders in the Silo Heights, the last natural barrier before the capital, are buried alive in their trenches. But Zhukov has a trick up his sleeve, a psychological weapon designed to terrify. As the shelling stops, 143 massive anti-aircraft searchlights, positioned every 200 yards, snap on simultaneously. Their beams blind the German defenders, turning the night into a blinding, artificial day. It is meant to shock the Germans into submission. Instead, physics plays a cruel joke on the Soviets. The smoke and dust from the bombardment are so thick that the light reflects back, blinding the attacking Soviet troops. The attack stalls in confusion. The Silo Heights turn into a meat grinder. It takes 3 days of brutal, hand-to-hand combat to break the line. But quantity has a quality all its own. By April 19th, the sheer weight of Soviet metal crushes the German defense. The road to Berlin is open. At 11 a.m., on April 20th, Adolf Hitler's 56th birthday, the first Soviet artillery shells land in the center of Berlin. They are not presents. They are the heralds of the apocalypse. Berlin is no longer a city. It is a skeleton of concrete and rebar. The beautiful facades are gone, replaced by mountains of rubble that block the streets. But this rubble is exactly what the German defense needs. It turns every basement into a bunker, every pile of bricks into a machine gun nest. The city is defended by a ragtag ghost army, depleted SS units, foreign volunteers from France and Scandinavia who know they will be executed if captured, and the Volkssturm. The Volkssturm is the tragedy of the dying regime. These are old men and teenage boys, some as young as 13. They are armed with bicycles and Panzerfausts. The Panzerfaust is a crude, single-shot anti-tank weapon. It is a metal tube with a warhead on the end that looks like a fist. It costs almost nothing to make, but to a Soviet tanker, it is a nightmare. It fires a shaped charge, a hollow cone of explosive lined with copper. When it hits a tank, the explosion inverts the copper cone, turning it into a jet of molten metal moving at 25,000 feet per second. It punches through steel like a hot needle through butter, spraying the inside of the tank with liquid fire. To use it, however, you have to be close, suicidally close, 30 meters. As the Soviet T-34 seconds enter the suburbs, they find themselves in a deadly cage. The tanks can't elevate their guns high enough to shoot the snipers on the upper floors, and they can't depress them low enough to shoot the boys hiding in the cellar windows. The Soviet crews respond with ingenuity born of desperation. They weld old bed springs to the sides of their turrets. The idea is that the bed spring will detonate the Panzerfaust warhead before it hits the armor, dissipating the molten jet. It looks ridiculous, tanks rolling into battle covered in rusty mattresses, but it saves lives. By April 25th, the ring is closed. Berlin is encircled. Inside the city, civilization has collapsed. There is no water, no electricity, no food. The civilians, the cellar tribes, live in the dark, emerging only to carve meat from dead horses in the street before the shelling starts again. Deep beneath the Reich Chancellery, in a concrete box buried 30 feet underground, Adolf Hitler is moving imaginary armies on a map. He orders General Steiner to launch a counterattack to save the city. "Steiner will fix everything," he mutters. But Steiner has no army. His divisions are ghosts' names on a piece of paper representing men who are already dead or captured. When Hitler is finally told on April 22nd that Steiner is not coming, the facade breaks. The dictator screams, a final outburst of impotence, declaring the war lost but refusing to leave. Above him, the Zoo Flak Tower is waging its own war. This is a fortress of reinforced concrete, a medieval castle for the modern age. Its walls are 8 feet thick. On its roof, massive 128mm anti-aircraft guns are lowered to fire directly into the Soviet tanks. The Russian shells bounce off its walls. It is an indestructible island in a sea of fire, packed with thousands of terrified civilians and wounded soldiers. But the heart of the battle is the Reichstag. To the Soviets, this building is the symbol of the beast. It is the prize. Stalin has ordered that the victory banner must fly over it by May Day. At 6 a.m. on April 29th, the Soviet 150th Rifle Division reaches the Moltke Bridge. The bridge is rigged with explosives, but the German engineers detonate them too late. The bridge is damaged, but it stands. Soviet infantry swarm across under a hail of machine gun fire, so intense it cuts the cobblestones. They reach the Königsplatz, the open square in front of the Reichstag. The building is a fortress. The windows are bricked up, leaving only narrow firing slits. A deep anti-tank ditch filled with water protects the front, and digging in for the final stand are the diehards of the SS. They are fighting with the ferocity of men who know they have no future. The Soviet attack begins with a terrifying sound, the screech of the Katyusha rockets. These are truck-mounted rocket launchers, nicknamed Stalin's organs because of the wailing noise they make. A battery of Katyushas unleashes a salvo. Hundreds of rockets arc over the square and slam into the Reichstag. They don't just explode, they saturate the area with shrapnel. The stone face of the building is pitted and scarred. Under the cover of this steel rain, the Soviet infantry charges. It is not a tactical maneuver, it is a wave. They fall by the hundreds, but they reach the steps. At 18 hours on April 30th, while the battle rages upstairs, a single gunshot pops in the bunker. It is a small sound, barely audible over the ventilation fans. Adolf Hitler is dead. He has taken the coward's way out, biting a cyanide capsule and shooting himself in the temple. His body is carried up the stairs to the garden, doused in petrol and set on fire. The man who set the world aflame burns in a shell crater, leaving his followers to face the wrath he created. But the soldiers in the Reichstag don't know this yet. They are fighting room by room, stairwell by stairwell. The combat is primal. In the main hall, the seating area of the German parliament, men are fighting with trench spades, knives, and bare hands. The air is so thick with dust and smoke that tactical flashlights pierce only a few feet. Grenades are tossed between rows of seats. The screams echo off the high stone ceilings. The Soviets are dragging 45mm anti-tank guns by hand up the stairs to blast open the barricaded doors. It is madness. It is the end of the world compressed into a single building. At 22:50 hours on April 30th, Sergeants Yegorov and Kantaria, covered in soot and blood, reach the roof. The dome of the Reichstag is a twisted skeleton of steel girders, shattered by years of bombing. Below them, Berlin is a sea of flames. The fires cast a hellish orange glow against the night sky. They fumble with the banner of victory flag number 5, a hastily stitched piece of red tablecloth with a yellow star and hammer and sickle. They lash it to a statue of a mounted knight. The wind catches the fabric. The red flag snaps open over the ruin of the Third Reich. It is the defining image of the war. A photographer will later recreate the shot for propaganda, adding smoke and editing out the looted watches on the wrist of a Soviet soldier. But the moment itself is real. The beast has been decapitated. Down in the city, the news of Hitler's death spreads slowly. Some German units surrender immediately. throwing their weapons into the Spree River. Others, the true believers, commit mass suicide. In the parks and subways, officers shoot their families and then themselves. It is a contagion of nihilism. On May 1st, General Hans Krebs, capable of speaking Russian, walks into the Soviet lines to negotiate. He asks for a conditional surrender. The Soviet General Chuikov, sitting in a command post that was once a dining room, laughs. "There are no conditions," he says. "Unconditional surrender, or we turn the city into dust." Krebs returns to the bunker and kills himself. Finally, at 6 a.m. on May 2nd, General Helmuth Weidling, the commander of the Berlin defense area, orders his troops to cease fire. He drafts a proclamation that is read over loudspeakers mounted on trucks driving through the ruined streets. On April 30, the Führer committed suicide and thus abandoned those who had sworn loyalty to him. The struggle is pointless. The guns stop. For the first time in weeks, silence falls over Berlin. It is a heavy, ringing silence. It is broken only by the sound of falling masonry and the crying of survivors emerging from the cellars. The Soviet soldiers, exhausted, sleeping on the hoods of their tanks, wake up to a strange new world. A world without war in Europe. The cost is staggering. In the Battle of Berlin alone, the Soviets suffered over 300,000 casualties. The Germans lost nearly 100,000 soldiers and tens of thousands of civilians. The city is a moonscape. 70% of the buildings are destroyed. The streets are impassable, choked with the wreckage of Panther tanks, crushed trams, and unburied bodies. But the outcome is absolute. The 1,000-year Reich has ended after 12 years of terror. The unconditional surrender is signed days later. The swastika is torn down, trampled into the mud. The Battle of Berlin was not just a military operation. It was a reckoning. It was the moment where the industrial fury of the Soviet Union, forged in the agony of the invasion, finally crushed the source of its pain. It proved that no amount of fanatical ideology or wonder weapons could stop a force that had learned the brutal mathematics of modern warfare. The Germans had the jet fighters, the V-2 rockets, and the Tiger tanks. But they lost to the T-34, the logistics of the Studebaker truck, and the sheer, unstoppable will of the Red Army. As the smoke clears on that May morning, a Soviet traffic controller, a young woman with a flag, stands at the Brandenburg Gate directing convoys. The quadriga statue atop the gate is battered but standing. The war in Europe is over. The Cold War is about to begin. So, here is the question for you. Was the frantic race to capture Berlin by the Soviets driven by military necessity? Or was it purely a political move by Stalin to claim territory before the Americans arrived? Could the Allies have taken Berlin with fewer casualties if they had just waited for the siege to starve the city out? Let me know your analysis in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the final days of the European theatre, where every street corner was a battlefield, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss our next story from the front lines of history.